But before that, Israeli activists are accusing the country's army of firing indiscriminately during last year's 7-week war in Gaza. A new report is based on the accounts of more than 60 IDF soldiers who were directly involved.
The rules of engagement were open fire everywhere, first thing when you go in.
We didn't know they were inside.
People who look at you from the window of a house, they, to put it mildly, won't look anymore.
What you were listening to there were extracts from a report by a group called Breaking the Silence. We spoke to its coordinator, a former IDF soldier himself.
We had very clear rules of engagement, which stated that unless a suspect is carrying arms and is endangering you, you are not allowed to shoot. Once we approached the soldiers that participated in the last operation, they told us a very different story. The guiding principle in this operation was that once they enter the strip, if they see any person, they need to shoot immediately because the military dropped pamphlets warning the Palestinian civilians that they have to leave. And therefore, in the eyes of the military, whoever is still there in the neighborhood has to be a militant. Most of the soldiers that came forward did not come, I guess, claiming that they were coming there, you know, wanting to kill uninvolved civilians. Basically, they were lied by their commanders. It wasn't intentional in a lot of the cases, especially when I'm talking about the approach of the individual soldiers. It was indiscriminate, but that obviously is fundamentally different than being intentional.
Well, the Israeli army says that the activists have failed to provide any proof of their claims, although Israel has been previously accused by both the UN and human rights groups of disregarding civilian lives during the operation called Protective Edge. That lasted 50 days and it killed more than 1,000 civilians. Well, these images we've just brought up for you now show the sheer scale of the devastation inflicted on Gaza by Israeli airstrikes. The Palestinians have since formally joined the International Criminal Court in The Hague with the aim of prosecuting Israel for alleged war crimes. RT's Katie Pilbeam spoke to security analyst and former British Army officer Charles Shoebridge about the actions of the Israeli forces.
Largest number of those were not killed in close combat with the Israeli army. They were killed by airstrikes, artillery and other heavy weapon fire at a distance at which the target could not possibly be said to be posing a threat to those soldiers who fired. So really we have to take this report, which is bad enough in itself, in a context of, in many ways, a much greater culpability in the terms of this very indiscriminate use of not close-range weapons, as many of the soldiers on the ground were describing, but the heavy weapons which cause, of course, these great numbers of civilian casualties.
Here's one quote from one of the soldiers then. I'll read it to you. So the rules of engagement are pretty identical. Anything inside the Gaza Strip is a threat. The area has to be sterilised. Now, as a former military officer yourself, can you imagine giving an order to sterilise one of the most populated places on Earth? There is this, if you like, seems to be a differential between the value of some lives and the value of others, those that are seen to be allied to us. And remember that during this campaign, the US and the UK, for example, totally backed the Israelis, although later there was some, if you like, concern about the disproportionality and the high death toll. But they absolutely backed what was going on. And, of course, the Americans even supplied these weaponry. And when you have such good intelligence systems as the Israelis have, including drones, satellite images and so on, in signals intelligence, when you have such good precision weaponry supplied largely by the United States, there really can be no excuse or understanding of the very high proportion of civilian deaths other than some degree either of recklessness or intent.